I'd like to call the Corporate Services meeting to, what do I say? Order. It's a little early for me. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the territory of the Coast Salish people. And let you all know, if you haven't learned, there is some snacks in the Director's Lounge if you didn't get breakfast or you need some fuel. So may I have an approval of the agenda, please? Moved. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now we have public input period.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning, sir.
Nice to see you on this nice crisp morning. Madam Chair, I would like to chat about function 488 or any other money that can come to stop a disaster that's happening right now as we speak. Every day we have hundreds of trucks coming over the Malahat, dumping soil of questionable quality. Some of these people are hauling great soil, other people are hauling horrible stuff with garbage. Our research group has been up at the SIA pit, watching that pit. There's 100,000 tons of contaminated soil up there, and it's sitting on a leaky liner. And as we speak, there's a company from North Vancouver putting in a bid to close that forever on that leaky liner. We can see, our research group can see and smell the leakage, but we can't do anything unless this is tested. And the water testing is not just basic testing for water like your coliforms and E. coli. This is for metals, mercury, uranium, carbon, hydrocarbons. And so without the support of this board here to ensure that we have our soil dumping or deposit bylaw in, our hands are tied. We have the Ministry of Environment giving out permits to dump soil in our watershed. Our watershed is being devastated. We have planned, we've planned. We need money to fight this, and right now, or you're going to find that we're going to be having 100,000 tons of contaminated soil sitting on a leaky liner. Madam Chair, there has been several groups working on this, and as Director Acton says, we're all trying to work together on this. And I was at a Shawnigan Basin Society meeting the other night, and Dr. Fraser says the tax function allocation to the Shawnigan Basin Society was enabled to a transparent public process available to all voting residents in Area B.
You have about 30 more seconds, I'm sorry.
The announced purpose was to enable the Society to work towards a watershed stewardship master plan that would address the long-term health of the watershed, particularly with reference to the maintenance of our potable water supply. Madam Chair, I would hope that we could have some discussion on the budget today on function 488 or the watershed function that has just been approved. But we have a fire on now, and we need to put it out fast before we're stuck with this.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Anyone else from the public? We have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Morning.
My name is Ed Weeb. I'm a resident of Shawnigan Lake. I'm a member of the Shawnigan Research Group and also past president of our seniors group in Shawnigan Lake. And the reason I bring up the seniors group is the fact that concerning the Shawnigan Basin Society, their office that they have in Shawnigan Lake and the paid executive person that's in there seem to be sticking points for the budget for the Shawnigan Basin Society. The Shawnigan Basin Society is very open to allowing their office to be used for responsible groups in the area when they need to have a space to hold a meeting or for some of their activities. And this is true with the Senior Society. When we need to have a function that can't be done in our usual spot, I have a key given to me by the executive of the Shawnigan Basin Society. I have access to that office, and it's provided to us for certain activities free of charge. The only requirement is that we keep the place neat, turn the lights and the heat off, and make sure that everything is in order. So any worthy organization in the community has access to this office if it's available at no charge. And this is one of the reasons, this is one of the sticking points apparently about having that office there. The other concern about that office being there seems to be the cost. I think you all are aware that any organization must have a good front to the community and to any other stakeholders that might want to be involved with this. If there is no office, if there's no way to show a public face, then the operation is suspect. And also, when applications for grants are made, and there's nothing there to show that this organization is actually visible, the grants just don't come through. Going a little bit further to the paid executive, the one paid employee, again, this person has been very active in procuring grant money for the Basin Society, and it has been able to leverage a lot of money coming in from outside grants above the funding from the local area taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Wiebe.
Thank you.
Can you wrap it up? It's
Yes.
been over 3.
In closing, I just want to say that the request is that the funding for this Basin Society be reinstated from $0 to $50,000, which was established by a legal process in about 4 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. Bernie Yearling, Mill Bay. I voted positively for both referenda, thinking these were good activities, and I was shocked to learn that over $200,000 are going to be clawed back from these monies to pay for the referenda. And I had assumed that with any good accounting practices, the CBRD would have budgeted for these referenda and shouldn't be clawing back from the money set aside for the watershed and the Cowichan Housing Association. So I started thinking, why would it cost over $200,000? And I can see, well, yeah, you would have fixed costs such as costs for advertising, mailings, etc. But that would account for maybe $40,000 or $50,000. And where's the other $170,000, $180,000 coming from? So the only thing that comes to my mind, these monies are coming from the costs, the hours spent by staff on this activity. And these are really imaginary dollars, if this is the case, because the staff would be paid regardless of whether there's a referendum or not, and regardless whether the referenda passed or did not pass. So these are imaginary dollars. And I can also perhaps hear an argument that, well, the staff spent overtime in some public meetings, but the staff are professionals, and professionals are paid a salary and not a wage. and they're paid a good salary, and one of the reasons for this is they are expected to work beyond the normal working hours on occasion. So I don't understand why imaginary dollars are being used as the excuse to take monies from the watershed function and from the Cowichan Housing Association. So if you can take imaginary dollars from these budgets, there's no reason why I can't use those dollars to pay for the Shawnigan Basin Society. And my final comment is, for the $750,000 set aside for the Cowichan Housing Association, I was shocked to see that $250,000, or 1/3, is used for administrative costs. So $250,000 to administer $500,000, to me this is insane, especially when you consider that the Cowichan Housing Association, from my understanding, is run to a great extent by volunteers. So why are we spending $250,000 on administrative functions when those monies could be used towards housing functions? Thank you.
Thank you. I think you realize that this is an input period, so you have asked some questions, but this isn't the time that we normally answer them. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Good morning, Madam Chair, directors. My name is Bill Savage. I'm a resident of Shawnigan Lake. I spent 10 years on the Shawnigan Lake Parks Commission. Did not miss a single meeting in those 10 years. I am now a member of the Shawnigan Basin Society. I've been on the Basin Society for 2 years. Again, have not missed a single meeting. I am here to speak on behalf of my supporters. I ran in the last election as well, and we are in support of the Basin Society funding and hope that the board votes in favor of reinstating the $50,000 in order to keep us going. Over the last few years, we've done a lot of work that the community doesn't know about. I myself discovered or came across, stumbled across, I guess, a technology about 8 months ago, a nanobubble system that can fight the milfoil problem in Shawnigan Lake, and I brought it to the Basin Society, and we've been working hard to get that in order and testing done. This could be a solution not only for milfoil in Shawnigan Lake, but across the country and around the world. So we are very excited and look forward to continuing this work. I've also, as a member of the Basin Society, taken out a number of groups on Shawnigan Lake, showing them problems that are occurring out there. I've had the Environment Minister George Heyman out on a tour as well, showing him some of the issues that we are dealing with. And again, as a member of the Basin Society, I urge this group to support funding for this group to allow us to continue our good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? So before we move on, I'd just like to address the previous speaker, just to remind people at home and people in the room that at a previous meeting at Regional Services on January 23rd, it was moved and seconded that a report be prepared showing a detailed breakdown of the 2018 election and referenda costs. So the answers to those questions, though it wasn't question period, will be coming. And I thank you all for coming and giving your input. So now, Mr. Berry, there are no delegations?
No delegations, Madam Chair.
Correspondence?
No correspondence and no information items.
So we go directly to reports, and I believe we're starting with Mr. Carruthers. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Carruthers.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, directors. Before I turn it over to staff, I just wanted to make a few introductory comments leading into these 2 days of budget deliberations. Excuse me. As you know, over the course of the month of January, we've all been busy in our various commissions, committees, reviewing the budgets. Staff have been attending and presenting information to those various committees and commissions, and we've now had the benefit of the various amendments that have been proposed. We're going to start today in a bit of a sequential process. We're going to give you an overview of where we have gotten to in terms of all of the results of those various meetings. Following that, we're going to have a brief discussion about the budgets that have been approved to date, and many of them have had recommendations for approval. And then we're going to spend a little bit more time and some more detailed discussion around the budgets that were either referred back to staff to discuss with the various directors or to make some recommendations, as well as some that had some very specific recommendations, such as Budget 100, Function 100, General Government. Following that, we're going to present the budgets that have been amended since the various committee and commission meetings, so the entire committee is aware of the outcomes of that. So essentially, wrapping up the first part, staff will be in a position after your discussions today to give you a revised figure of where the budget is at in terms of its requisition. Following that, if there's any additional items that directors would like to bring forward in terms of budgets that they would be proposing any further amendments to, we will do that after that initial analysis has been done. So bear with us. We've got a lot of information to get through over the next couple of days, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance staff to walk us through the reports. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Crothers. Mrs. Solder? There we go.
There we go. Are we on? A brief overview of where we're at so far based on the decisions that have been made at committees and commissions. So far, our requisition increase for usual CVRD services is 5.96%. From other jurisdictions, which is primarily the library for us, is $76,000 or 0.21%. And from the two new services is 3.52%. So that equals a total increase of 9.49. And you can see this on Schedule A, and I'm just looking, this is attached to your agenda, but I'm also looking on our website if that's easier for you to access. And on Schedule A, you can see here we have, this is small on the screen, but we have the numbers that show the changes to the requisition from each of the new services. There's the library there, and then the change from usual services down below. Schedule B, also on our website and attached to your package, shows the effective requisition changes by jurisdiction. So you can see here we have separated out the cost of the new services and the change for other jurisdictions, again the library. And if you follow it all the way over to the side, you've got a % increase per $100,000. And you can see how that varies depending on area. So while we do speak sometimes about the global increase, the increase as it affects the different areas can be very different depending on which services different areas participate in.
If I may, Ms. Solder suggested there's two ways you can see this, and the way that I find, just for your, if it helps, the easiest is to be on the CVRD website. Remember, you go in under Services and Finance, because then you can toggle back and forth really, really easily.
Just like I'm doing right here on the screen.
Thank you.
Okay, and so also attached to that report is Schedule C, which shows the historical breakdown by jurisdiction, and it just shows the increase over time. So as we noted on Schedule A, the increase from usual services right now is 5.96%, and if you look on Schedule C, you can see that in 2017, we were at 5.98, in 2018, 5.35, so that is generally in keeping with where we've been for the last several years. And that's the brief overview of where we're at now.
Thank you.
So if I may, I'll just move on to the next item on the agenda,
Please do.
which is just a brief overview of the budgets approved by the committees and commissions. So we now have 180 services at the CVRD, and 172 of those were actually approved throughout the deliberations in January. Some of them were approved with amendments. Some supplemental items were included. Some directors made motions for amendments, and all of those have been included, and they are reflected in the overview that we presented earlier. There is also a chart attached to that report, which lists what the outcome of those changes are and where the money to fund those is coming from. And we can use that as a good starting point when we go back at the end of the day to see if there's any other functions that directors would like to revisit.
Carry on.
All right, so moving on. There were some very specific functions that directors asked be brought back for further discussion. The majority of these have actually been, the area directors spoke with staff, obtained the information that they requested, and proposed no further changes. So there are a few recommendations that have been included on the report. Mr. Barry, did you want me to read the recommendations? Or will you do that?
Madam Chair, how would you like to proceed? We have 6 recommendations, and I'm recommending unless somebody wishes to pull one.
If I may, I would actually like to pull number 6. Or to suggest further discussion with respect to number 6 to the board.
Okay. Does anyone else want to pull any others? Okay, so I would like,
This is only R3, right?
yes,
Number 1 to 5.
Director Morrison.
I would move items 1 through 5 on report R3.
So it's moved and seconded. Do they need to be read, Mr. Barry?
Anybody watching on the streaming video, it's better if they are read.
So would the
Did you
mover
want me to do
please
that?
read them, or? Okay, Ms. Hilder.
That function 233, Cobble Hill Community Parks, 2019 draft budget be approved. That function 352, Fire Protection Cowichan Lake, 2019 draft budget be approved. That function 353, Fire Protection Saltaire, 2019 draft budget be approved. That function 354, Fire Protection Satlam, 2019 draft budget be amended to include a $50,000 increase to requisition and a $50,000 increase to transfer from operating reserve to fund an independent third-party review to conduct a detailed seismic evaluation, a building code review, and an evaluation of the operating effectiveness of the Satlam Fire Hall once other Public Safety Division projects prioritized by the board have been completed. And number 5, that function 460, Recreation North Oyster, 2019 draft budget be approved.
So does anyone have anything they want to say about this, or can we call the question? Okay, we'll call the question, 1 to 5. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
With respect to item 6, function 540, South Sector Liquid Waste Management Plan, this was brought back because, referred back to staff because we actually thought it was close to the requisition limit. We determined it's less than the requisition limit, but when doing some of the year-end funding transactions for 2018, we noticed that some gas tax that was scheduled to be used in 2018 had not actually been fully expended. So we are suggesting that that be transferred and forwarded to 2019. That will actually enable us to reduce the requisition by $87,000 in this function, $87,197, which will result in a small decrease in the function overall of $139.
Thank you.
This feels like too many numbers.
What would help you?
Okay. I'm just looking at.
Director Acton, can you put your microphone on? Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the VADM, just kind of went a little quick there. I had sent an email last night to staff. I know that was a little late, but just to have a little bit of a refresher as to why this function had doubled in requisition. And I did get a, wait, I need that.
Oh, is that a different one?
My notes are on there.
No, that's the one that I took.
Okay. Sorry.
Excuse me, Julie.
And I did get a reply on that, but perhaps staff could just re-explain the reason why this, and when this budget was actually approved. I just couldn't remember.
So this budget was asked to be brought back to this meeting so
Did
that we
happen
could double check. In
Was that the
January?
January 23rd meeting?
I want
'Cause
to say yes,
I was trying to find the staff
but
report.
more than likely the 23rd meeting, yes, was, I believe it's a regional service, so yes, that would be Regional Services Committee. And at that time, we believed that the gas tax funding had all been spent. which would have equaled a requisition of $190,000 or an $87,000 increase over last year. We determined through our review of 2018, as we're finishing our year end, that the gas tax had not actually been spent. So if you look here on the screen, what we're proposing is transferring the gas tax year to 2019, this $87,000, and that will allow us to reduce the requisition to $139 less than in 2018. Is that better?
Any other questions or comments? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if this is the correct place to answer, but I'm sure where we've got Talitha here, it would be good. On schedule, I'm sorry, this is just a general, for my own clarification, attachment A. There, the new services provided are the Couch and Housing Association and the drinking water included in there. So I have to ask, at the moment, we are anticipating that will be, the new bylaws will be in place during 2019 and approved, and we will start collecting that money for 2019. Is that correct?
The new bylaws were approved in 2018, as far as I'm recalling. And yes, we are including this in the requisition for 2019 based on the decisions that the committee made at the last meeting.
So if you'll recall, Mr. Wilson, I think or Director Wilson, I think they add up to 3.52%.
They do.
The two new functions. Yeah, it's not really on this function, though.
No, okay.
What you're talking about, we'll be talking about those later on in the agenda. Thank you. Okay, on this, number 6, any other questions or comments? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve it as amended? Moved? Seconded? Do you have something more you'd like to say? Director Acton.
Thank you. Could I have the final number then with the gas tax?
The total budget
Incorporated, yes.
is $190,414, as shown here on this line, and that's a little bit less than last year at $207,197.
Anyone else, or are we ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, R4.
Ooh, R4 is function 131, and I will ask if I may, I will ask Ms. Miller to speak to that rather than myself.
Thank you. And that's function 531? Yes. Yeah. Ms. Miller.
Madam Chair, this particular function, 531, the South Cowichan Water Study, was referred back to this committee for further discussion. There was a subsequent meeting with Director Acton and an email sent out with some outlines of the proposed work to be undertaken this year. So the budget sits before you. It is paid through taxation for areas A, B, C, and D.
So would anyone like to ask any questions of Ms. Miller? Is anyone prepared to move a motion? Oh, okay. Director Acton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to discuss this function a little bit with my colleagues. Last year, it was a resurrected function that was retired, and then what we were presented with was it was a one-time expenditure, and that the CHITE study, CHAITG, would be conducted, and then the funds for that would come out of the new watershed function. And I know that this function right now has a line item for the Shawnigan Research Group to do some monitoring. So I would like to kind of look at I'm a bit conflicted because it is a shared function, and it is something that we could use in Area B, but it was not presented to the public that way last year, and I'd like to work that through.
Ms. Miller?
This function was established a number of years ago with a focus on declining water supply in the South Cowichan area, driven primarily by growth in the Cobble Hill Mill Bay zone, and so that was one of the focuses of this particular function. The other focus is on water quality and the establishment of water quality objectives through the area. The function had been put forward a number of years ago. It had been continuing in terms of programming, and it was put to zero at the request of the Shawnigan director a number of years ago at the last minute. So there hadn't been a discussion that I'm aware of with regards to the long-term objectives around this function. We now have a regional process, which we've tabled a work plan and a process for identifying activities that would be undertaken regionally versus sub-regionally. And it is the purview of the directors to decide whether or not the issues in the south area should be addressed with a particular focus. I have proposed to the directors that the completion of the water quality objectives reports are undertaken and completed. The province has, again, said that they're in a position to provide those reports to us. However, this has been an issue, an ongoing issue, since roughly 2012, when we were expecting the reports for Cowichan Bay, which are still unpublished and unprovided to us. And so the recommendation to the directors was that as we move forward, we need to take more of an active role in terms of establishing objectives which meet our needs, not necessarily the needs of the province, particularly with regards to the liquid waste management plans and the objectives with regards to the ability of the environment to assimilate those wastes, as well as long-term water security plans. So that's what's laid out to the directors, with some funding attached to undertake those activities this year. There was not funding anticipated in the proposal to the directors to continue with the Fisher Road work, pending discussions with other parties with regards to responsibilities around the ongoing monitoring of a specific plume. The other work that had been proposed was to do or continue to do additional work in the South Cowichan and Cobble Hill area, particularly Aquifer 197, which is under extreme stress, to try to understand the water balance model and the limits to growth in that area. So that's what's before the board or before the directors, and it's the purview of the directors to decide whether or not they support those proposed activities.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see there's a large tax requisition increase, $60,000 to $75,000, and another large increase in expenses from $33,762 to $75,000. Can you tell me what those figures represent?
Excuse me, can you just repeat that again? So I'm actually looking at that schedule
Okay.
when you're speaking.
Let me find the right, there's so many bits of paper here. There's a tax requisition on,
Director Wilson, when you find it, if you could say the heading.
Sure,
So that we
yeah.
can all follow along.
Can you come back to me then, please, after that? I'm finished for the time being, thank you.
Okay, Director Yanni Dornito.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Yanni
Yanni
DiNardo.
Dornito.
I'll just help you out for the next
Sorry.
little while. That's okay. Think of boring, yawn. I just, myself, I just feel that for Area D and with the new function, that this one would make sense to be rolled into it, not, to me, it's like double dipping. And also for Area D, which also has the flood management in it. There's so many different add-ons for Area D, never mind the new function. I really can't, I can't vote in favor of this. So I would have, I believe it was director from Area A last time, requisition 0. That motion wasn't seconded, and that's why it was referred back. But I would like to see this one back to 0, but I'll wait to hear from the other areas that participate in it as well.
So I'd like to acknowledge CAO Carruthers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just maybe to help the committee's deliberations, I just wanted to reemphasize that we saw this as a transition year. We have the new function, and staff have put forward a proposal to the board with respect to how to determine the scope of the new function and the expenditures moving forward. And we anticipated that there were going to be some challenges in 2019 in terms of existing activities that are underway that are not clear as to whether they would move into the new function or not. So just in terms of our appreciation, that I know that there was some expectation that certain functions were going to move into the drinking water and watershed protection function, and that may be the case, but those decisions have not been made, and in the meantime there's work that has to continue. So staff were just making the board aware that this was a transition year, and there may be some perceived double dipping in order for us to keep our programs moving forward and meeting some of the obligations that we have. And I would hope that next year, after we've done the work with the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service, we would have more clarity as to what functions would be moving into that function and which ones wouldn't. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Follow up?
It's the clarity to me all along with all of the functions, the new functions, and where it was going. For me, it would even be clearer for directors for it to go into one, because now we have all these bits and pieces as well. And the expectations that I felt this function was going to provide for my community. So I really struggle with this, but I appreciate Mr. Carruthers and saying that this is a transition year. Maybe it gives us some leeway, but I would hope that we would be shifting it into that function. So I will continue to hear from the rest of my peers.
Thank you. Are you ready, Director Wilson, or can I bump to Director Ryan?
I've got, first of all, sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. In attachment A, if you scroll down, that's the Vadim report.
Right.
You'll see that on the 2018 amended budget, 60,000, and for 2019, 75,000. And the same thing if we scroll down a little bit further. The increase in expenses from $33,000 to $75,000 over that period as well. Can I get some kind of idea of what those increases are?
Through you to the Director, Madam Chair. You'll see an increase in staff time spent on this particular budget. When the budget had been put together in the middle of 2017, we had anticipated that the province was going to be bringing resources. They were unable to do that, and so staff spent time on this particular project. That is correctly recognized in the 2019 budget, so there's an increase in that particular area. There's also a decrease in the overall 2019 budget under project expenditures from the 54,000 actual expended. It was projected at 76,000. However, the programming changed in the middle of last year with the increasing attributed to the Fisher Road areas. So some of the programs that had been anticipated were put on hold pending more detailed information from that study and the availability of resources. So in 2019, we are currently proposing 46,000 in project costs, not 76,000.
Follow up, please. Yeah, 46,000 increases in project costs, and that's the Fisher Road investigations or the South Cowichan Water, or what's it for?
It's all of the project expenditures in terms of projected costs for the project expenditures to do surface water sampling to provide support to the Shawnigan Science Group as well as the CVRD's water quality program. Cost for the software that's required for that, as well as some exploration in terms of the water balance in the Cobble Hill and Mill Bay areas.
So I can assume then that all these funds are going to be towards the South Cowichan area for water monitoring and ongoing investigations in that area?
That's correct. It's not attributed to areas outside of the contributing zone.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a large list. Director Acton, I think I'm going to come to you after people who haven't spoken yet, so I will go to Director Ryan.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question, Brian, Mr. Carruthers. With the new water function, there seems to be a bit of slack in the budget. Just out of curiosity, why couldn't these funds come from the slack, the existing slack in the new function?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through to Director Ryan. I'll have Ms. Miller discuss the issue of slack in the budget. We have budgeted for the projected undertakings in 2019. If what you're referring to is the fact that we're not fully requisitioning that service. So if that's what is being referred to, that's certainly the committee's choice. If they want to increase the requisition, staff had put forward a recommended requisition of $500,000 in 2019. That's entirely the committee's and ultimately the board's choice to increase that to absorb some of these additional costs. It wasn't contemplated when we put the $500,000 forward. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Director Wilson already touched on the item that I was thinking of asking about the $76,000 for the project expenditures. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I have Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I can see what Mr. Carruthers said, that this is a transitionary period. This whole thing opens up the question, though, and that's where Director Yanni DiNardo is right. There's no clarity with this water function that we approved, because in previous discussions that I had with staff, we discussed around, okay, are the individual water systems standalone, or as far as I know, they cannot be combined? Well, this is kind of like a step in that direction. If this was rolled into the water function that has been approved now, that would mean that a problem that exists in one specific area would be rolled into the whole system, and then everybody would be paying for that. Well, that's almost trying to combine water systems, and that's a fine line, and I have a real problem with that, because if that was the case, what we would be facing in the future is we'd be facing battles among all of us here. Oh, I want some of that money because I've got a problem there, and so I think we'll have to be very careful as to how we're going to do that, because this could end up in a real schmozzle.
Yes, Mr. Carruthers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm sure Director Kuhn shares concerns that other directors may have in that regard. So, when this service was contemplated, we understood that there would be works and activities that would be taking place on the ground in sub-regional areas. Director Kuhn's absolutely right. The individual water utilities are standalone discrete services and was not intended to absorb them into the new service. The issue around the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service, and I use the example of an aquifer or a particular watershed where multiple parties are drawing their water sources from that watershed. Cobble Hill Aquifer being a really good example, and we'll just even drill down to the Fisher Road area where you have multiple water utilities, you've got private wells, you've got industrial wells. Individually, those utilities and individual well owners don't have the capacity to do the studies that are necessary to protect their water supply. So there will be sub-regional activity happening under this watershed service. It's going to be really difficult to do it all on an entirely regional basis. The intent of moving forward into the future would be that we would establish some priority setting criteria around where those efforts would be expended, around risk. So communities that are really at risk of their water sources being threatened in terms of either quantity or quality, and that won't be entirely decided by CVRD staff, that we would have some form of an advisory committee that would help us to look so that over time, those funds would be expended regionally, but there may be priorities in certain areas of the regional district that might take priorities over other areas initially because of risk and because of the threat to water supplies. So I appreciate Director Kuhn's concerns, and it is going to be, like all regional services, it's always a challenge to make sure that you're getting equitable distribution of those funds across the region, and we will attempt to work with the board to come up with a process that allows us to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Crothers. Before I go to a follow-up for Director Kuhn, for the new directors, my recollection of when this was contemplated was it was fully recognized we're not going to know exactly the work plan, because if you make a work plan before you go ask for the money, then people think, well, it's already a done deal, and it creates a lot of problems. And so that's hence the transition year. And since we're funding it on taxation and population basis, it doesn't make sense to start before looking at the down road challenges to roll everything in this first year. And I mentioned about North Cowichan. We happen to be the largest population member, so per capita we're paying more into this function, so we might want something at some point. But so it makes sense as a region to think that way and to make sure that maybe the best expenditure is in the south, because I think that everyone who voted for this does want regional water security, but we need to have those facts, is my understanding, before we can start to do it kind of willy-nilly. So have I got that right?
If I may, absolutely. There are also issues in the south area that are midstream, and so does it make sense to put them aside for a year, or does it make sense to conclude them? So the directors that are paying into this have received some recommendations. We had recommended, for example, last year that a observation well in the Cook's Isla was a high priority issue. The recommendation is that that be put aside and be covered under the regional strategy, because the benefits accrue to the larger area, and that this program, in terms of the transition year, really focus on the completion of the water quality reports that are specific to this particular area. We'll also be in 2017 working with the community and others, including the province, to establish a framework with regards to water quality objectives and attainment. So in the south area, for example, we're collecting water quality data that is really, in the Shawnigan, focused on contaminant loading in terms of soil deposition and SIA, which is really different than what a standardized water quality program would be. And so that helps us determine what would be a standardized approach taken through the whole area, and what might be a specialized approach in specific areas given the pressure in those areas. So this is a transition year, and I am recommending that those programs continue so that we can conclude that work and use the information from that work to inform the rest of the region's analysis.
So in a way, if you were to use a medical analogy, this is kind of the triage period, right? Another follow-up, Director Kuhn?
Yeah, this is not really directly connected to the question we're dealing with now.
Oh, then can you save it till when we get to
Please let me continue. It blends into the water program. My concern is, and maybe this inclusion of the Coxila test now, that's just one step. And my concern is this, it should be then, we should really outline as to what is this water program going to pay for? Because is it going to be that, let's say, there will be water quality tests done in the whole region, and then let's say one area has a shortfall in the water quality. Now, is that going to be sorted out with the funds from the overall function, or are we going to go back to the individual area then and say, well, you know, we discovered you have a problem there. You're going to have to establish a function to pay for this. So I think there's really wishy-washy information out there, and I'd like to really get that cleaned out, because there'll be infighting, and there'll be, but this really affects the whole area, so we want this paid for. And we have to be really clear on this. And as you know, I'm very concerned about control of funds. And we could lose control so quickly over that. Everybody is wanting to extract money from this thing, and before you know, we'll be just in a mess there. So I would really want to point that out.
I appreciate that, Director Kuhn. I'd just like to add that this board will have the control of what happens to those funds. And what we're hearing from staff is, in this transitional year, they're going to come up with a plan and recommendations and triage, if you will, and we'll decide as a board where is the best place for these funds going forward. So we will have that time, but we don't have that information yet. So I have Director Stone and then Director Yanni Darnito, and I believe Director Wilson. Yanni Donardo. Wow. I've still got you, but you've spoken several times.
Thank you. So I agree with Director Kuhn. Everybody hold on to your seats. Save for a few items. So I'll let everybody settle down for a minute, and then save for maybe a different perspective. I think we all spoke to a transition year where a board needs to make some really important decisions. And what's been proposed by staff and approved so far through committee was working through this year to determine that schedule of study, that schedule of work, and to prioritize items in conjunction with some of the I don't like the word stakeholders either, but interested parties within the region that come from every end of the region, whether they're from the CVRD North Watersheds Group, Shawnigan Basin Society, South End users, West End, basically throughout the region to help us find that direction and prioritize that work. Then it will be the board's direction to approve that prioritization, and not to preclude the South Cowichan water study work, but until those determinations are made through that engagement process and through those board decisions, it would be absolutely premature in my mind to start trying to throw functions in there because you're predetermining outcomes of a regional service, which I don't think is appropriate. I think it's entirely appropriate, though, to consider whether some of these items that we're talking about in the South Cowichan water study, and that really is a conversation for the directors that are directly affected, whether or not to continue that function this year, or if they can hold on through the process of prioritization and see if it kind of comes to the top for the regional service, in conjunction with many other priorities that will be balanced throughout the region based on, the critical need. I think we all understood that at times, in any budget year, there may be more funds through the regional function going to one area or another, understanding that we all agreed, and our electors in general did agree, that water is a priority in the region and protecting our watersheds and our drinking water supply. Any municipal or regional government will say the most important thing we can do for economic development or quality of life, any way you look at it, is make sure we have clean, sufficient potable water for everyone. So I think that we need to defer in some sense to the direction of the directors for this year, but I don't think as a board or as an individual I could advocate or support just folding that function in during this year until we've had that priority setting. So I guess the question is for the directors that are directly impacted in their areas, Is it a hold-off year? In other words, are you going to zero the requisition, or do you want to continue the work for this year as we go through that strategic process of prioritizing the work for the regional function?
Thank you, Director Stone. I think I've been remiss in not bringing Director Acton in the lineup, so I'm going to put her in next, and then I have Director Yanni DiNardo and Director Wilson and Director Sebring. And then I'm hoping we can move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate what Director Stone commented on. I would like to emphasize, though, that this function was resurrected because of the director in Cobble Hill needed to get some work done. Although I would like to support the communities in South Cowichan. I take a little bit offense to comments about North Cowichan always being the biggest and paying the most. And if we're going to do that, then in Shawnigan, we have the highest property values, and we also have a large population. So I don't want to go down that route, although I guess I mentioned it, so. But I just want to also mention that the public did not expect to pay at a regional level, and then at a sub-regional level, and then at a local level. So I'm wondering if there is if we could table this so that we could have a little discussion with staff again about and table it to the end of the meeting. Is that possible? That we could have a short discussion at lunch? Would you want to do that? So that we're really clear on it?
I'm not sure we can have a discussion at lunch outside of the public, but I don't know, Mr. Berry, could we table it to discuss it later?
Yes, Madam Chair, if the will was to table it to later in the meeting, you can do that, but yes, you cannot move the goalposts forward, as we heard yesterday. You can't discuss it during lunch. It has to be during a public meeting.
So is it the will of the board to table this till later today, or maybe tomorrow?
If I may, Madam Chair, I believe we have to have this discussion. I think it's gone on for a while. That's why we're here today. And I think, you know, it's tough making decisions, but there comes a time when you have to. So I think that today is budget day, so get our blankets and pillows out.
So you're next on my list if you're done, Director Acton, are you? So, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think what we also heard from George Cuff yesterday in our workshop is that are we being economically sustainable as well? This is, that's a real powerful statement, because how much more our community is being taxed for stuff over and over again, and how can we, even at 5% annual, if you just keep doing that and thinking it's okay? And then you talk about affordability and housing, and you're now taxing people out of their houses. I think that we have, and is it our job? I think I heard that from George Cuff as well. But we're here now. I need more clarity about a regional function. And I have never been super thrilled with the South Cowichan. That's why we put it at 0 a few times. And I believe it's going to be complicated. And I think it should be 0 for this year and then transition. Then that can all be discussed in the transition period. Because right now I'm just not clear at voting for something and this money and hiring and the requisition going up higher, when I myself am not comfortable with what I'm voting for. So I really think that in this transition year, this function should be 0 till we're understanding the fairness and equity for all. So I'll move that it is 0 for this year. I make that motion.
Ms. Solder, do you have something to say?
Just for the committee's information, there is staff time included in this function. That is staff time that would not cease to exist if this budget for this function would be zeroed out. So that staff time and benefits would be carried forward to function 131.
Can you tell us what 131 is? Because my screen.
Environmental initiatives.
So that was the previous, oh, okay. It's getting complicated. So I have Director Wilson. Oh, okay.
Clarification, Madam Chair, was my motion to requisition 0 not seconded?
I didn't see it be seconded,
Thank
but
you.
if I mistake, okay. Now it's seconded. So to the motion to reduce this function to 0, bear in mind, that doesn't mean all the dollars go away. It will bring up the function in 131 by, I'm not sure if, Ms. Solder, you have the amount for staff?
It's approximately $25,000.
$25,000 would be transferred to a different function. So to this motion, I'll take, I think I'll take my existing order. Did you have something, Director Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems to me that we wouldn't be having this discussion in such detail if it had been clear right from the start what this new function was going to include. And I kind of am nonplussed at the remark just now that, well, we put this referendum forward before we had a business plan or knowing what we were going to do with it, if I understood that particular comment correctly. Well, you go to a bank and say, give me some money, please, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it. What do you think their answer is going to be? So this discussion right now is really something which should have been done on the run-up to the referendum. I'm in favour of continuing things as they are. The present services, the present studies and water are far too important to put on hold right now. It was an uphill battle in the first place to get these studies started and funded. And if we stop them, restarting will be very, very difficult. So I'm in favour of keeping them going.
Thank you. Director Sebring?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question through you to staff, what's the downside here if we approve the motion that's before us? I mean, I'm seeing things like water quality, groundwater investigation, surface water quality data collection programs. What's at risk if we pass the motion that's before us right now? How critical is it from a technical and a safety perspective and a liability perspective that we do this?
If I may, excuse me. If I may, we would, if it was zeroed out, staff would stop spending staff time on it because it's not been approved. And that means that the programs, the water quality collection program that we currently undertake for the area, it typically takes about 4 years to have enough data to develop the objectives report. That would be put aside. And then when the program did start up again, if that's the case, then we would start typically from the beginning again in terms of statistical data collection. So.
Supplementary, if I could.
Yes,
I'm not sure you answered my question. What's the worst case scenario if we stop doing this, aside from the fact that we have to start over? Is there a public health risk? Is the water quality, was the water quality so bad that it precipitated this, or was this just something that we say, you know what, we'd kind of like to have this information?
Maybe. It's a complex question because a lot of it is around dilution. So the question is, if we didn't continue with the study, part of it is around public confidence in government oversight. So for example, in the Shawnigan Lake area, many of those houses, septage goes into the lake. We have a utility which is governed under the provincial health objectives, the protection of source supply versus the distribution system. So I think if one stopped it at this point in time, you have no liability that's incurred as a result of it. You would use best available information, which is the information that you have at this point in time. So I think the appropriate component in terms of risk management, if the program were put into a holding pattern, is that you would want to undertake some very clear communication with regards to the CVRD's long-term objectives and a definition with regards to risk and a re-entrenchment of the polluter pay principle as opposed to the oversight of local government to enable that to happen.
You done? Okay. Director Morrison, are you wanting to get in line, Director Nicholson? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, this is an interesting scenario in that, I don't specifically have a dog in this hunt, but I think that what we're talking about is a very important principle around how are we going to be implementing the new function, and what are the specific activities that will be undertaken, and that's almost the part two to this discussion, and I know that when I was out in both rounds of the engagement and discussion with communities, water was huge. It was huge in all our areas. It was in Area G, Area H, as well as in the south end. What I see is being a little bit perhaps short-sighted, and I'm not suggesting any directors are being short-sighted in this, but we have some big decisions to make around what the new function is going to do. And I'm starting to get the sense that we came up with a number and an allocation that we thought would make sense based on $750,000. But there were still a lot of expectations that ENGOs would be rolled in and that functions could be collapsed into the function. And we may have to adjust what some of those priorities are in the new function. But the question at hand right now is a complete cessation of activities that are underway that are really important. And when I say really important, I'm talking about people in the neighborhoods, whether it's in Shawnigan or whether it's in Cobble Hill or whether it's in Arbutus Ridge, who view water as a very big priority and have come to this building and have talked to Mr. Carruthers and talked to myself and talked to the directors current and previous about how important it is that these studies get done. And I would argue that they continue to be done. So, well, I don't have a tax vote in this. I have a vote, but I don't have any of my tax dollars going into this. I think that we may be a little short-sighted in saying, no, we'll take this to zero and we'll wait to see what we come up with in our planning and priorities for the new drinking water and watershed protection function. So I'm going to suggest that that the directors that are responsible for this function perhaps look at somewhere in between the full funding of this as presented by staff and the other side of the coin where we're looking at zero, because the work that's underway I think needs to continue to happen, and it would be a real shame for us to get to the discussion of what our priorities are for the new watershed function and to know that we might have to start afresh with some of the work that's already underway. So it's, I hope there's a middle ground. I hope that some of the work that can continue to be done. And I hope that we can support the directors that ultimately have to make the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. I have Director Stone and then Wilson, Acton, Yanni DiNardo, Nicholson, and Smith.
So quickly.
It's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, well, it's an important issue, I
It is.
think. Director Sebring covered most of my comments and question, but reflecting on Director Morrison's comments, I wonder if Ms. Miller might have perspective on what a middle ground may be to allow the function to do the most important activities. And I would I would gather at least, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but collecting that sample data and keeping those samples alive would be a priority over any other, just to keep the continuity, I would say, in place. Is there a middle ground that would allow that to come forward? And, and to the piece about not having a dog in the hunt, well, if we transfer more costs back to a shared function, then we all do, because I think that things like general government, we're already looking at ways where we can cut fully regional expenses to bring down the burden on all of our communities. It doesn't take a financial background to look at the 5-year growth in our tax requisitions to know that it's becoming a stress on everybody. And I know especially at the people at this table. So I think it's a prioritization piece, and if Ms. Miller could, inform us on, is there a middle ground that would allow the important collection work to keep the continuity of the sample data and stuff authentic? Is there a middle ground there, or is it kind of an all or nothing?
Madam Chair, through you to the directors, I think there is a middle ground, and it's really easy to start going down very discrete rabbit holes. And I think the middle ground that I would propose is that we complete the water quality objectives as per the parameters laid out by the province, as opposed to looking at a long suite of additional issues in the Shawnigan area that really pertain to soil dumping at this point in time. For example, the Cowichan Watershed Board is doing a phenomenal amount of work reaching out to agricultural producers based on some initial work that we had done years ago, yet those water quality objectives reports have not been completed to the provincial standards. And so it's important to base that back on a standardized approach. And so my recommendation is that that be a priority focus to complete the water quality objective report for Cowichan Bay, Mill Bay, and the Lower Shawnigan area, given the increased density of proposed development in those particular areas, as well as the parallel work with regards to the liquid waste management plan, that those are foundational documents for those two components. The second priority that I would suggest would be the continuation of work and dialogue with FLNRO, in particular with regards to Aquifer 197 and the very concerning results that we see now. When the original program had been in play, these are long negotiations with the province looking at budgets and forecast and work plans. And when the directors decided in 2016 to put the budget to zero, we lost staff and we lost the capacity to continue to partner with the province. And so this kind of uneven on and off the bus is really challenging when you are developing partners. So to continue with that program. Now, is that the full cost? Is that $46,000 worth of expenses? We could probably bring it back to somewhere in the 30,000 range, but I would be uncomfortable going less than that at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Follow-up, Director Stone.
And just for clarity, Aquifer 197 is where?
Aquifer 197 is...
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Ms. Miller. Could I ask directors to listen to the consultation, because this is really important, and Director Stone is asking an important question that will help inform your decisions. Thank you.
They were whispering the same thing, I think, that Ms. Miller is saying, but it's the Cobble Hill one.
The Aquifer 197 is the top of the Cowichan Bay benchlands.
Okay.
And so it's a critical aquifer for growth in that particular area. There's substantial agricultural activity and projected growth. It reaches out towards Cowichan Station and parts of Cooks Island. We're not clear around the interaction there with the adjacent aquifer. Cobble Hill, and then the Cherry Point benchlands on the north side of Mill Bay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an interesting term that Ms. Miller made about public confidence, and that's high on the priority because it seems to me that public confidence in governing bodies, be it federal, provincial, or local, has been dropping quite considerably lately. And if we now start thinking of stopping services, which has taken forever to get going in the first place, then picking up on data in the future with a big gap, as we've had before, is really not going to show anything at all. You can't have these data gaps and then explain something to people, well, it's because of this, that, and the other. And I'm going to suggest that this is what will happen if we stop everything. Private owners, as they've been doing in the past, will start to constantly test their own wells. They will then be coming to me and they'll be coming to you saying, this is what we're finding. What are you doing about it? And the site owners who have been party to the possible contamination sources are going to think to themselves, well, and they've been diligent because there has been oversight. That oversight is now going to disappear. And without that, it's going to be a free-for-all. So, and as far as I'm concerned, 50%, it's like taking your car in for a service and saying, change the oil, but don't bother with anything else, you know, nothing else on the service thing. You really think that that's going to last? It's not. This is an all or nothing. It's not a 50% or a 30%. And if I'm making my point a bit strongly, I'm sorry, I feel very strongly about this. None of us can get by without good water.
Thank you, Director Wilson. I have Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as Shawnigan Lake the research goes, that's a small line item, but I think it sounds like the work will only happen if it stays in this function. So I would like to move that it's approved. Oh, there is a motion already?
No, there's a motion to
for
go
zero.
to zero.
Okay, I will be voting against zero, and then if that doesn't pass, I'd like to have a motion for the full requisition. I think one huge part of it is the Cobble Hill work, and we need to support our neighbors. So I will be voting no against that motion.
Does anyone have something new to say about the motion one way or the other, or are we ready to call the question? Director Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a new function, the water function, it's very important that we all move along with our water and within the Cowichan Valley Regional District as a region. I am looking at the environmental initiatives, I'm looking at this budget, and I'm looking at the new budget. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that this function has a $75,000 requisition, and it's for a specific area. And then you move over to the new function, and it's got a $50,000 grant going to the Cowichan Watershed Board, most likely. And so it kind of, to me, makes me wonder, well, all of a sudden that the Cowichan Watershed is now moved into that function, and the studies that it undertakes, but it then alienates this one that could also have moved in for this area. So it seems like there's a bit of disconnect between the two functions, and that the south end, they need to continue with their studies to ensure that they have the water quality and the water quantity. But there also seems to be a disconnect by one specific area being moved into the other function. And that's basically my comment, is I'm struggling to see one moved in and not the other one moved in, because it shows only one specific area is being targeted under that function. Thank you.
So if I may take a stab at this, and please correct me, Mr. Carruthers, if I'm mistaken. The funding for the Cowichan Watershed Board has been paid out of, I believe, general government. Is that correct?
No, Madam Chair, the funding for the Cowichan Watershed Board has previously come from the 131 budget, which is regional.
So that's basically what I meant. it's, all of us are already in the region paying for that. And so it made sense to staff and some directors and chairs that that would continue because we're all paying for it. And it's also a partnership that we have with tribes, with other levels of government. So that's already equitably being pointed out. When I bring up the North Cowichan thing, I think it's being taken the opposite to the way that I mean it. I'm not going to be coming here to say, I want the funding to clean up Quamachin Lake. I don't believe that we can throw every need into this pocket of money in the valley. So does that help you, Director Smith? The Cowichan Watershed Board is already being funded regionally by every participant at the board. So it makes sense that it's kind of a no-brainer that it would begin to go in there. And over this next year, it'll be decided what other things would go in there. Not sort of willy-nilly, but after looking at everything and all of the priorities and all the critical areas. So in other words, we may decide to do things in the south from the north because our water's pretty good, and we may not be getting any of that money because the goal is to have regionally us secure for water going forward. Does that help?
Thank you very much for your clarification. I still struggle with the Cowichan Watershed Board moving into the new function and moving from environmental initiatives. I feel it should stay in environmental initiatives, which is still a regional paid into function, and that when it's time for this possible function to roll in 2020, that this one moves in and the Cowichan Watershed moves in at the same time. I think that we're putting one and then we're not putting both, or this may be something that's finding a complication for others at the table.
Thank you. I have Director Nicholson and then Director Yanni DiNardo and Director Stone after that. Remember, the motion on the floor is to zero out this function. So really, we ought to be on this question. What do you feel about this? Do you want to zero out this function? At the time to talk about if you want to do something with another thing would not be at this moment, because I'd like to move through this question soon if we could. Director Nicholson.
I just would like clarification. So my understanding is the projects that we're funding are proposed to be funded are groundwater largely in Cowichan Bay area, surface water, and then special surface water stuff in Shawnigan Lake, but the general surface water quality around the whole area, or Cobble Hill, or where?
Madam Chair, through you to the Director, thank you. Great clarifying question. What I'm suggesting that the focus of this program with the limited budget in terms of consulting time is that we focus on the completion of the water quality objective reports for Cowichan Bay, Mill Bay, and the Lower Shawnigan area. And the rationale for that is because there is a lot of other important work that is building on them, and those are foundational documents. Second to that, I am proposing that we continue with a limited scope in partnership with the province to examine groundwater supply in Aquifer 197.
Okay, so I'm still confused. Where does the Shawnigan Lake water come in?
We already have a water quality objectives report established for Shawnigan Lake, and there is additional work being undertaken with a larger suite of contaminants for Shawnigan Lake and the Upper Shawnigan Creek. So part of the Shawnigan Creek work was done in partnership with MOE, Mr. Carruthers, if I remember correctly, in 2016 and 2017 as part of an arrangement with the province specifically regarding the downstream effects of SIA and other background depositions.
Right, so but my question is, that is not part of the water quality objectives work, the general stuff that we're doing.
Given the limited funds, I'm not suggesting that that be part of the 2019 work at this point in time.
No, but what is in the proposal for 2019? It did include that, did it not?
It was included if we brought forward the residual from last year, which would increase, I believe, somewhere in the region of 20,000, has not been expended last year. But if the program is put to zero, we still need funding in the program to pay the allocation expenses next year. So there still needs to be something there. So at this point, there's a request for approximately 10,000 for additional water quality data collection. There would still need to be a report written. We would have to go to public market on that. So my suggestion at this point in time is if you have to cut something, that would be the area to cut. I am not suggesting that there be an expenditure in continued work focused on Fisher Road at this time either, that the limited budget does not allow that.
Right,
Thank you.
but I'm just trying to get clarification. So if we zero this out, we are going to lose the groundwater issue in Cowichan Bay being dealt with, the surface water objectives for Cowichan Bay, Lower Shawnigan and Mill Bay, and the more detailed water quality stuff for Shawnigan Lake. That's what we'll lose. Is that my understanding?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. Now we have Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
To your motion, or-
I'm not at all, to my motion, I'm not at all suggesting that requisitioning this to zero at this time is going to lose anything. I'm just saying that we have a pause here with this and then wait till the water function, till we clearly understand. I mean, I've been the one out in boats with Ministry of Environment doing the water testing with the Cowichan Watershed Board. Septics itself and the float homes and everything else I've been working for years on. And I believe that the septic fields, if we're talking, and totally water is the motherhood and apple pie, absolutely, it's something that we all want to protect. The septic itself, can I ask, is that not island health? We talked about, I think it was Director Sebring that said if there's any liabilities or anything that we would be losing in the next year. And I believe I heard septic.
Ms. Miller.
We're going deep down this particular hole. Septic is a major issue. Septic's issue around Shawnigan Lake. We've got historic development within the flood zone impacting water quality from poorly functioning septics. We also have some fairly substantial septic issues in Mill Bay where a vast proportion of the homes are on private septic and impacts within the Mill Bay area. And so our Ministry of Health has guidelines with regards to septic design and standards. They do not monitor nor do they regulate the functioning of those septic fields over time that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. So we'd be taking that on too. I just want to say that I did get on this bus with this area A, B, and C, and D, and sort of looking to, that's why we canceled it at one point, kind of wondering where it was going. And I just think that this is going to come back to the taxation for Area D and about equity. And I think that that's going to be a huge part about the next process in the water function. So I'm not saying that this is being canceled or lost. I'm saying it needs to be moved over till the clarity and understanding is with all of these functions. Thank you.
Director Wilson? Oh, I'm sorry, it's Director Stone. Then Wilson, then Marcotte.
I was just going to say call the question, but
Are we ready to call the question? So would you read the motion, Mr. Berry?
That the requisition limit for budget function 531 be reduced to zero.
Right, and the staff wages and benefits would be transferred to.
That was
function
not part of the
131.
motion.
Okay, well, that's information. Well, we're understanding, however it's worded, we understand the meaning of it, I believe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. So, Director Acton.
I would like to move that function 531 South Cowichan Water Study for 2019 draft budget be approved. And I have a question.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. And your question?
And the question is to finance, have all the reserved funds been moved forward? Do we have to add that? Ms. Miller mentioned bringing forward funds from last year.
The amount that Ms. Miller was referring to was a surplus from 2018, which we do not automatically roll into 2019 budgets. In accordance with the operating reserve policy, it would become part of the operating reserve for that function.
So can I add to my motion that the reserve funds be moved forward to 2019 and reduce the requisition?
So that would be, if I just heard Ms. Solder correctly, that would be going against board policy, correct?
Because it's still in surplus, it would be moving forward surplus to the following year. However, our policy does state that funds are put into operating reserve if they are in surplus. Currently, the operating reserve for this function is less than $1,000, so it is definitely lower than the board's policy with respect to operating reserves.
So having heard that explanation, would you like to go back to, would you like to change that motion in any way, Director Acton?
Oh, man.
It's not an easy role. I acknowledge that fully. Would you like to move the motion as it stands in the report?
Just as it stands is fine, then we can have a bit
Seconder?
of money in case something else comes up, because the.
Do you, like me, feel we've really had enough debate on this, or does anyone else really want to weigh in? Okay, so the motion as it stands is on the floor. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Those opposed? Director Marcotte, Director Ryan, and Director Yanni Darnito opposed. So I think we need a 15-minute recess. There's some snacks in the Director's Lounge. Director Top. Okay, if I could get people to take their seats, please. So, Brian, who's going to do our... Okay. Okay. Do I have to call it back to order, or are we still technically meeting. So we'll call the corporate services meeting back to order. And I just want to ask that we respect one another, and when we are in order, that we talk only when we're recognized, because there's people who've said that it's being difficult to concentrate when others are talking a little bit on the side. So if we could do that, I'd appreciate it. And so now we'll call up Ms. Solder for R5, the report from the Assistant Manager, Finance, Refunction 100, General Government 2019 Draft Budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the last meeting, we were asked to bring back some options with respect to Function 100. The originally proposed tax increase was $118,391, or 5.14%. We were asked to come back with some options to keep this to a 2% increase. For the committee's information, a 2% increase equals $46,086. So that's a difference of $72,000, or $72,305 to be exact, that staff were asked to come back with options for. Staff did review the budget and have come back with several options for consideration by the committee. One of them is the legal services budget, originally budgeted at $100,000. Staff believe that reducing that budget to $50,000 is doable. Should a large legal expense occur that was unexpected throughout the year, we do have some operating reserves which could be used to fund anything unexpected. The majority of legal costs are directly attributed to the function in which they occur, so general government is not as likely to have an unexpected legal expense. The next potential option for decreasing the budget is from the regional grant and aid. Our regional grant and aid budget is $150,000 as per the board's policy. Currently, including the two new functions in the CVRD, there are 37 functions that are either direct grants to organizations or include a grant as part of their budget. The draft 2019 budget includes almost $1.8 million for grants already. That does include $150,000 for regional grants and aid. But staff felt that reducing this in half by $75,000 would not have an overly onerous impact given that large number of grants and aid that is already suggested. The third option that staff came up with was the strategic investment line. Strategic investments are in there for projects which may arise during the year that the board would like to pursue. The budget does include $150,000 for this, as it has for the last 2 years. Again, staff suggests that keeping that budget at $75,000 is reasonable, and should a larger project come up during the year, we do have some operating reserve funds that could be used to fund it. So those three options could reduce the budget by as much as $200,000, which is significantly more than staff were asked to find. In addition to this, there were 3 Tier 1 supplementals that were put forward as part of the original presentation. Those supplementals are for procurement sourcing software, bid solicitation software, and a purchase order module for the accounting software. The total impact on requisition of these 3 items would be $25,195. One more addition, at the board meeting on January 23rd, it was recommended that the first choice of benefits coverage for elected officials that wish to participate is to enroll in the enhanced benefit plan from UBCM, and while staff researches other carrier options. The cost for this, should all directors choose to participate, is $46,445. So staff have included that in our budget. In the report is a little table which shows on page 3 the total impact on the requisition of each of the options, including if the board were to include the supplemental requests, and if the board were to include the supplemental requests as well as the benefit plan that was directed previously.
Thank you. Director Kuhn, you had something?
Yes, I'm basically in favor of the proposition that I would like to cut the regional granting aid to 0, though. Considering the tax increases that the public is going to face this year, I think would be very well advised to cut that back.
Director Stone, did you still want to speak?
Well, I'm not sure I would go quite that far, but I do support discussing, including options 1, 2, and 3, along with the supplemental request for the procurement work, et cetera, and not proceeding with the benefits in Function 100. I think that many of our municipal partners do have benefits through their municipal. Ladysmith does not. But in light of some of the cost increases that we're dealing with, I would support options 1, 2, and 3 with the supplemental, but not with benefits. And the benefits for electoral area directors would remain within Function 250. So that's just where I'm at right now, and I would, if somebody wants to move it, I would support it. Ladysmith does not. But in light of
So were you moving it?
some of the cost increases that we're dealing
Director
with, I
Stone?
would support options 1, 2, and I said if when the time comes that
Okay.
was moved, I would feel
Okay.
comfortable supporting it.
So, Director Yanni Darnido? Yanni Donardo? I've got it right here.
Thanks. Yeah, I really think that we should be, I'm not sure the municipal directors, the Blue Cross, what I understand, the extended medical, they need to do that for, it starts for a term, so it has to be done right away. So I don't see a problem with that, so I guess if the municipal directors already have theirs, that's fine. I really want to see us moving ahead in a lot of the functions in planning, because I feel that this is directly connected to the jobs we're here for and for CVRD. And not exactly, I think it's, maybe Mr. Kieber could tell us, how much do we give in grants on an annual basis? I really want to see us moving ahead in a lot of the functions through.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
In my report, as noted in my report, the total grants in the 2019 budget are $1,768,797 so far.
So we actually do give a lot of, it's not under that same category, regional granted aid, but our budget in our philanthropy is quite generous.
Quite generous. Madam Chair,
Thank you.
if I may.
Oh, sorry.
I have
report,
Director
as noted in my
Smith,
report,
Nicholson, and
The
Kuhn.
total grants in the 2019 budget
Director Smith.
are $1,768,797 so far. It's me.
So we actually do give.
One of the things that I've noticed in regards to seeing that the CVRD has 27 functions that are either direct grants to organizations or include grant programs as part of their budget, is approximately $1.8 million. I have sat at this table many days with all the other directors, and one of the things I find is that we are sitting here making decisions whether staff should have a safe vehicle, that we're sitting here making decisions whether our planning department should have an additional staff member. Are we here for services, or are we here for grants to groups? You know, where are our core services that are needed? We have IT that is in need of items. We have areas that function where we sit, and what I thought our goal was as directors is to make sure that the communities are able to come to the CVRD and to get their planning done within a set time, not having to wait. We're triaging items that are being put on hold because we don't have the tax base. We have a great tax base. We have a huge area that is being requisitioned for items, but I really am struggling to see putting 1.7 for grants for organizations when we don't have the ability to have the amount of staff that we need, safe vehicles that we need, and some of those basic functional items that we are, I thought, here to be responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So, this 1 million plus that we give in grants, could you clarify for me, please, that that includes the annual operating grants that we give to organizations like hospice, like the Glenora Community Hall? Yeah, so what we're talking about here, though, are the grants that we give out to help communities who come forward with new initiatives that will provide services to our community. Now, I think investing in our community is a really valuable thing to do. You get so much more bang for your buck when you have functioning community organizations doing so much of the work that we cannot afford to do ourselves. So I think it's short-sighted to start cutting grants and aid in particular, and I certainly would have a discussion about what the appropriate level is for annual grants and aid. These are the new initiatives that we provide to regionally to important organizations who come forward with a new initiative that they think is of value to the community. So, we can have a discussion about the amount, but the actual thought of cutting it off because we're already spending money to support hospice and so forth is very short-sighted, I think.
Thank you. Director Stone.
Point well taken, I think, on both sides of the issue. But the number that you quoted does not include significant grants and aid that are provided municipally as well. So if you look at a regional level, you're probably talking in the order of magnitude of well over $1.5 million. We have grants to organizations, social services organizations on a municipal level, I know. And I appreciate the concept behind the regional grants and aid program, and I've always been quite supportive of those grants. However, I feel that we're starting to create a situation where we're creating a need in the community for these community organizations through taxation to try and pick up the slack. So, I don't support completely doing away with it, but I do support a more balanced approach that cuts that budget back, and we can reflect on how that works through the year. I also understand benefits for our electoral area directors. If we want to have benefits municipally, which I'm sure we have had lengthy discussions about, some of our municipal partners have decided to go ahead with benefits for their elected officials and some have not, in Ladysmith, for example. But I have to come back to the challenge that we have this year with the new functions and significant increases, that the only place that we're going to be able to make a measurable difference in the tax requisition from all of our communities together is this budget. And this is our opportunity to make a significant impact in that, while adding a supplemental that would provide for what I feel could be better savings down the long road. I would always say, don't cut things that can save you money or generate revenue. So I would be supportive of options 1, 2, and 3, but then supporting the supplemental, which would, according to the chart here, result in a requisition decrease of 2.45%. I think that's measurable and impactful, and that savings would be distributed to every area within the region. So I think if we're thinking about a difficult year where we're transitioning, we're bringing new services online, that if any year were to be a little bit more restrictive from a financial position, this would be it. And then when we don't have that burden next year, we can open up the discussion and reflect on what those lower budget amounts resulted in through 2019 and see if we want to adjust them for 2020. I continue to support the same position that I put forward earlier, and I think this is a great place to save money and also hopefully generate better value for all of our citizens through the procurement supplementals. So I do hope the committee would support those changes.
Thank you. Director Morrison is next. Oh, you know, I didn't write you down.
So it must be me. So
Go after him.
was Director Stone moving that, having the benefits go back to 250?
I didn't hear a motion.
If he was, I'd be seconding it and speaking to it.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
To the motion?
Yes, and I think that there's merit in everything that's been said to this point. And I've been here long enough to know that it may not happen this year, but we have every likelihood of there being a meeting coming up, whether it be in April or August, where something important comes forward, request is put to us, and we want to be able to participate. And whether it be seed funding, whether it be as a major sponsor, we will want that opportunity to participate. I want to just speak briefly to what Director Nicholson had said, in that, you know, we may look at that big global number of those flow-through grants that we provide to various organizations, but I'll note that a lot of those have been elector-approved functions, that the public has said, yes, fund these through operating, fund them on a regular basis. So I'm comfortable with the notion that we are a flow-through organization, that we send our community's tax dollars to specific organizations. I don't have any difficulty with that. I also am comfortable with the fact that we are in a tough year with a big requisition facing us, and I think it was Director Stone that said it's going to be a tough year even to keep our existing friends without going out and finding new ones. So I think a reduced amount for grant and aid makes a bunch of sense. I think that having some dollars in there for a strategic and key priority that may come forward is prudent. And I think we end up with a reduced requisition number that will help everybody's bottom line. I think that the
Director Morrison,
Yep.
I'm sorry, but I think we're talking about the motion to reduce the medical benefits right now. Could you? No? That's what Mr. Berry tells me.
It's the whole,
Okay.
it's the whole thing.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this obviously can be a little messy because there's a number of things happening here, and you should really deal with them individually. The motion that I heard was that the benefits matter issue item be referred to 250.
I heard that too. And
I
it
don't
would-
think that was the intent. I was supporting the 1, 2, and 3 and the supplementals and the move to
Right. I think I would prefer to deal with them one at a time so that I can manage otherwise I think it's difficult to follow. So is there any objection with dealing them one at a time, these three?
And Madam Chair, what I was going to suggest, because I know Director Acton was thinking of putting forward a motion as well, is in front of you, you have, based on the staff recommendations, 1, 2, and 3. If you just deal with 1, if you follow the staff recommendation, it's set out there to decrease legal and regional grant and aid and strategic investment by the dollar amount put forward. But there's been discussion here, different opinions I'm hearing on regional grant and aid. So you could do option 1 3 separate times. Amend the budget to decrease legal by X, have that discussion, vote. Another one, amend it by regional grant and aid, decrease, have that discussion. and then
Which is
strate-
option 2 in our agenda package, Mr. Berry.
And then strategic investment.
But right now, we have a motion on the floor, so I think we need to clarify what that motion is.
Well, Madam Chair, I would say it may be best if you agree to withdraw that motion because it wasn't written down and it was just made up. I've heard different from what the movers said, and we don't have clarity because it wasn't written down. I would suggest that, and you can do that, you can withdraw it by consensus of the committee and start again.
I would recommend that, and that we begin with option 1, option 2, and go step by step so that we all know what we're talking about. Any dissenters? Would you like to give your plea? Do you think you've got a?
You're too sharp for us.
Yes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we go to the step-by-step piece, I am a little bit interested in the net effect of all these recommendations. We see here in the report that the reduction is 3.45%, but at the start of the report, the original budget had an increase of 5.14. Now, this reduction of 3.445, is that
It's
taken off?
3.51, actually.
Or 3.51. Is
Oh,
that
thank you.
taken off the 5.14, or is that an actual reduction? Is it a difference, or is it an actual reduction in total requisition for this function?
Ms. Solder.
That would be a reduction in requisition from 2018.
So total, so the difference actually amounts to 8% almost. Okay.
No, it would be a $200,000 decrease in the requisition, so a 3.54%.
Right, okay. I just wanted to make sure we weren't just reducing the rate of increase. That I needed clarity there. Thank you.
Okay. Would anyone like to move option 1? Director Stone? Seconded. 2 options. Okay, Mr.
And Madam Chair, there's 3 parts consisting of all 3 or just individual?
Individual.
I think it was, on your advice, was individual, so option 1 in the table. So that function 100, general government, 2019 draft budget be amended by decreasing legal by $50,000.
Thank you, Director Stone. Seconded by Director Sebring. To that motion. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Who would like, if anyone, to move option 2?
I would move that function 100, general government, 2019 draft budget be amended by decreasing regional grant and aid by $75,000.
Seconded. To that motion. No discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Option 3, anyone like to move that? Tag team of Stone and Morrison.
I would move that function 100, general government, 2019 draft budget be amended by decreasing strategic investment by $75,000.
To that. You want me to call the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so now,
Madam Chair, if
yes,
I may.
sir?
I would move that Tier 1 supplemental request for procurement sourcing software, bid solicitation documentation software, and purchase order module be approved, and if I may speak to it, if there's a seconder.
There's several seconders. You may speak to it.
So I just want to, going back to the table and to Director Sebring's comments, my understanding is that the as-proposed number in the table was, with the supplemental, 6.23, with the motions that have already been approved and the supplemental, if it were approved, we'd be at minus 2.45. So what Director Sebring was trying to get at is what we're talking about then is from a 6% increase, 6.23%, down to a minus 2.45%. So we're actually talking about a reduction in the budget number of 8.68%. Thank you.
So to the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. You may.
If there's no move on the benefits, right now the benefits for the electoral area directors exist within function 250, is that correct?
If I may, based on direction from the board resolution on the 23rd, an estimate of the full cost of benefits for all directors has been moved into function 100 and out of function 250. 250 previously included a portion of electoral area director benefits. A portion was always in function 100.
Okay. Thank you. That's a challenging one.
Director Acton. I'm sorry. Do you mind deferring?
Oh, no.
Director Morrison.
Well, I thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to seek direction from staff on on an equitable path forward on this, given that it's shouldn't all reside in 100 and should mostly reside in 250. What would staff's recommended path forward be right now?
I'm sorry?
Madam Chair, I think we'd want to have staff have some analysis of that and report back to this table.
Okay. Director Acton.
Well, I was just going to say that I wasn't in favor of completely removing any benefits to directors. Not sure that I would participate in it, but it's already a very taxing position, and it's one of the few benefits that there is. So it's nice to be able to attract people to have a successor. So taking away benefits as well might be detrimental to that.
Director Stone.
So I have to question Ms., we had this discussion around this topic in committee. It did come to the board. I was, at a high level in favor of, all directors at the table get benefits. And the function 100 sounds equitable and reasonable. However, in light of the fact that, I can speak to North Cowichan, and the mayor can speak better to it, or other members of North Cowichan, but they have a benefits program in place. The town of Ladysmith, the council decided not to proceed with a benefits program for council at the cost of the taxpayers. We do have the same program, and if we opt in, we pay out of our own pocket. And I agree with Director Acton, though. It's something that should be considered. However, if we make the decision as a committee or a board that the electoral area directors would only be the eligible ones for the benefits, and it's going to be paid out of tax requisition, I don't think there's any justification for it to come from function 100. If that's the choice of the electoral area directors, it should be paid out of the electoral area's budget. I'm actually quite surprised that previously it was only available to electoral area directors, yet it was being partially paid for through function 100. So I'd like some understanding of how and why that would be, if possible, from staff.
So who could answer that for us? You can. Thank you. Ms. Salder, you're really being put through your paces today.
Absolutely. So my understanding is the rationale for splitting it between function 100 and function 250 is that electoral area directors do spend some of their time and do participate in functions that are more regional in nature. And so the electoral area function is for things that they do that are just for the electoral areas. So a portion of the wages, the stipend paid to electoral area directors also comes in from function 100.
Thank you. Makes sense. I knew there was some clarity there I was missing.
Director Sebring.
Actually, what Aaron said, I was going to ask exactly the same questions, because it just makes sense to me that this be funded out of 250, but hearing that staff explanation makes a little bit more sense, so I'll just leave it. Thank you.
Director Nicholson.
Well, I don't see how that makes sense if the municipalities pay for their people at the board table fully. You don't, we pay for some of that? But so what I just heard was that in this function, part of our stipend and our benefit, part of our benefits are paid out of this one because of regional stuff. Is that true for the participants at the board table who are from municipalities?
Yes, municipal director stipends are also paid for out of this
Okay,
function.
so then it does make sense.
So,
Go ahead.
thank you. So no benefits, though, just portions of the stipends, right? So I understand then municipal directors must be paid 100% out of general government, their stipends, right? So, yeah, I can see both sides of it. I'm getting closified over here. I'm trying to find save municipalities money. Sorry, if I may, just a little levity. You know, it presents a conundrum. You know, for me, for our municipality, we've decided as a municipality not to pay for benefits for our council. So that means as the member here, representative of the regional board, you know, I don't get benefits from my municipality. So it's a very different view than North Cowichan. I think then the question becomes, if we were to move ahead with Function 100 and all directors at this table, it does present a bit of a conundrum for the municipalities because we have 6 other councillors that we need to take care of one way or another or decide not to. If that is the case, North Cowichan's made the decision to do that. So then there's, and I think of North Cowichan because of their large assessment base, you know, if we made this move, and North Cowichan's already opted into a benefits plan that they likely have a contractual obligation with, there would be a significant cost to the members of North Cowichan when they're already locked into a benefits plan municipally. And sure, they might get a top-up from then the 3 members on this board because they're now included in a benefits plan at the regional government table. So yay, North Cowichan, you get tons of benefits, but your citizens not only pay for your municipal benefits for your entire council, 3 members here, or probably 50% of those 3 members, but then 50% of everybody else around the table. So I'm a regional thinker just like the next person, but, and I don't know. But this is a tough one, right? You know, there's that equality versus equity discussion that has to go on. And I'm not sure how maybe North Cowichan has a different lens on that, but not having a dog in this race, if I supported this, I think that, you know, yay me, but rest of my council and stuff is still without any kind of support.
So I think I heard Mr. Carruthers suggest that this go back to staff for some more clarification. Would you like to add something?
If I can, Madam Chair, we had just discussed the options. If the reason that it's in general government is because the recommendation from the committee, select committee, was to have benefits available to all directors. If what you're proposing is that it's simply, so what we're talking about is an enhanced level of benefits. The electoral area directors have a basic plan. This is a recommendation for an enhanced benefit plan. We're recommending that if you choose to provide that for the electoral area directors, that entire amount be funded out of Function 250, and it would be taken out of 100.
So I have a question, if I may, before you make the motion. So if it's well, it wasn't seconded, I don't think. Okay. So it's been moved. Can you clarify so Mr. Berry can write it down?
Basically, what Mr. Carruthers said, that the benefit package be accrued to the regional directors and that the entire cost be moved only to the regional directors and that the entire cost go into 250.
And that's seconded by Director Morrison. You'd like to speak to it? Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 questions. So that would mean that the municipal directors are not included in the benefits. And what about the step for the increased benefit? Would that still stand, or does it go back to the basic?
Well, this is for the increase, right?
This is a supplemental that is the increase to the enhanced benefits package.
The question has been called. Do you have something you'd like to add, or are you ready for the question?
I have something I'd like to add is that My understanding is the reason that electoral area directors, a portion is paid out of 100 is because we sit at the board table and we make decisions that involve regional, and that's the reason that the portion is coming out of 100. And can someone clarify that? So does that mean we don't have to come to the meetings for the board? No, I'm
going to take that as
I
a
just
joke,
was,
but
I was taking it as a joke because, you know, it is something that when we're at electoral area meetings, that we are covered under that. And then when we come here, we are working in a different level. And I've appreciated that there is coverage under the 100 so that we can work all together for this area. Thank you.
So I have Director Nicholson, Acton, Wilson, and then I'd like to insert myself, and then Director Stone.
So
and
I think
then
this makes sense right now. But what we're saying is that if we left it in this function, then the municipalities would have an opportunity to take advantage of it if they wanted to. And so, pardon me? Well, I mean, just the right, because the council members couldn't. So it was just, so it didn't seem to work feasibly, so this makes the most sense. Yeah, okay, got it. I'm supportive.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, one more question. Does that mean that this figure, it's just a small amount, 46,000, is taking into consideration 15 directors, and so that would be reduced to, okay, sorry, thank you.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've always been, I've always thought of myself as a fairly logical, clear-thinking person, but to be quite honest, I've never been so confused in all my life what's going on here. There's function 250, there's function 100. Well, you live in that area, so you can't have any of this, and we haven't got it because we're in that area. Just doesn't make sense to me. If we're going to be a regional cooperative board, and we're going to start cherry picking, well, no, you can't have that because I haven't got it, then we might as well give up now. I'm just totally confused right now.
Yeah, you're after me. So I guess I just want to weigh in, and I'm thinking of the logic that if area directors have a basic plan, and this is an enhanced plan, and if municipal directors have a basic plan, but they shouldn't qualify for the enhanced plan. It just doesn't sound logical to me, because the municipal directors that don't come to this table don't have the stress of coming to this table. So they don't, but anyway, it looks like maybe our HR person might be able to clear it up. Do you have something you could add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure we understand that we're not talking about the same plans. So the municipal directors often come to the table with plans that are provided from their insurance carriers from their home municipalities. The enhanced plan that we're talking about is a very specific product from UBCM that is afforded to elected officials who can't otherwise qualify for a plan, and they have a basic model which a number of our regional directors have participated in for years, and they have upgraded it a little bit, so we have an option for a little bit more benefit level, but it doesn't even compare to what a municipal director might get through a carrier at their home municipality. It's just a portion of that. It's very small. So we're not talking apples and apples in terms of municipal directors being somehow left out of an enhanced benefit opportunity. It's really the reverse, which is that we're struggling to provide even a marginally comparable benefit opportunity for regional directors compared to their municipal counterparts.
Thank you for explaining that so well. Director Stone.
Sorry, the municipalities, ours has no benefits plan, so I'm not sure what magic benefits plan you're speaking of.
Apologies, not all municipalities have benefit plans for their councillors, but some do. And so those ones are typically not are typically better in terms of the services they provide than the UBCM plan that's on offer.
Okay,
But you're right,
I
all
would
municipalities don't offer it.
I would check with our municipal partners, but my understanding is 3 of the 4 do not have a better benefits package than the UBCM one. Only North Cowichan does.
And that may be exactly right, and in which case this plan may be something that those directors want to consider. So it's just that the UBCM plan is not the same caliber as a employee benefits plan that's offered by a carrier. That was more the point I was trying to make.
When we reviewed that benefits plan, I would contend that I've got a benefits plan through my wife's work, and it was better than the plan that she gets through work, so.
Okay.
And better than the one that I've seen offered at our municipal council table, so. That being said, Madam Chair, I had a spot here just to ask a question of finance. So based on 9 directors at the amount that was cited, that's $27,864, not the $45,000 number. My question was in function 250 last year, what was budgeted for benefits for the electoral area directors?
The amount included in the Function 250 budget was only $9,281.
Okay, so you're looking at a net increase of about $18,000. Thank you. And this is a question I brought up, and I'm all for providing benefits. I think that this job is severely undercompensated in every which way, and I can't speak for the city of Duncan or Lake Cowichan on what benefits they may have. I can only speak for mine, and I know North Cowichan did make the decision to have a good benefits plan for their elected officials. I would contend that, and I know this didn't go very far in committee, but I'm just going to ask the board to think about it. It's not for a decision today, but it is germane to the topic, that if this is truly a regional issue, and I think that it is, that we work together collaboratively, our CAOs, to discuss if we do something as a regional function, that is equitably distributed through every single taxpayer in the region. If we want our elected officials, and I know that they're not all here at the CVRD table, but looking forward in the future when benefit plans expire, maybe this means it's only optional for next term because we have to opt in on these benefits, that we look at covering every elected official in the region, whether they're municipal council members or regional directors. And I understand the thing, they don't come to this table. But the only mechanism we have to support our elected officials as a whole is through the regional government. Now, I don't know, and again, the ins and outs, if they don't sit at this table, if we can do that. But I would even go to UBCM and contend that the benefits plan, group benefits plan, the only mechanism we have to cooperate on a truly regional level is Function 100, and that every elected official, councillors, mayors, and regional board members all be supported through a benefits plan through Function 100. And the only reason I say that is even though they don't sit at this table, that's the only mechanism we have to equitably share that cost for every elected official in the region. So I know that's not necessarily directly related to the motion, but
So
that's-
perhaps that's something the committee could look at over the next year, because I don't want everyone else to weigh on that here today, because that's not the question we're dealing with today. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Hey.
Yes.
Through the chair, so the Director Services Select Committee has given me that direction to take a look at what's available in terms of an association plan for all elected officials. I have had a preliminary response on that, and I'm expecting a response in writing that I'll deliver back to that Director Services Committee.
Thank you very much. So I have Director Staples and Director Sandhu, who've been waiting quite patiently. Thank you.
My thoughts have shifted so many times listening to what everyone has said that I'm not even sure where I'm at right now, other than the city does have the same plan as North Cowichan, I believe, or very close to it. We have an excellent plan for elected officials, and I'm happy to hear that that's going forward, because I think that it would make more sense to do it that way, because I don't know what Lake Cowichan, if you have one or not, but hearing, I made the assumption that everyone had something. And I think that, yeah, the work that we do, and particularly around this table, but even the work that we do in our own areas, I would I believe that all of us are always working, well, we are working on our own issues. We're also very much a regional thinking area. And so there's people from all of our different municipalities that attend a whole lot of different things that cross-pollinate and are involved in a lot of different places. So I'm happy to hear that that's moving forward. In terms of the motion that's on the table, I would like to, I mean, for the electoral area directors, that motion has been moved. You seem comfortable with that. I just want to make sure that it's equitable for you and for this table at this point in time until we can do something different. So as long as you're comfortable, I'm comfortable with that. But ultimately, moving forward, I do think that it should be something that is paid equally across the community for all the work that you do outside of, just your regions alone and all of ours.
Thank you. Director Sandu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The town of Lake Cowichan, there has to be 3 council members that want to sign up. So this term, there was 3 of us, so thank you.
Thank you. So let's hear the motion so everybody's clear, because I see a couple of furrowed brows.
Yes, Madam Chair. I've consulted with the CAO, and this is what the motion on the floor reads, that the cost of the enhanced benefits package for electoral area directors be funded by Function 250.
Are we ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, we are at, so could we carry on with R6 until 12:30 and then break for lunch? Does that suit? Because we've just had a break. Okay, Ms. Solda.
So R6 has quite a number of recommendations. Generally, these are all related to amendments that staff had to make following initial presentation to the committees and commissions, and we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of them. So the first section is primarily related to the windstorm, and so I believe our Parks Department previously made the electoral area directors involved aware of the potential costs from the windstorm. The total expenses related to the cleanup are $109,118 spread across several different functions. We've amended each of these budgets, and they're proposed here for approval to include paying for these expenses from surplus or operating reserve, which is what that money's there for. And because those expenses were incurred in 2018, but the bills for them were not received until 2019, so we need to make sure that those funds are in the 2019 budget. So on page 2 of the report is the listing of the impact for each of the individual functions. Additionally, we had a few functions with some small deficits for the year, the largest one being in Eagle Heights Sewer. All of those deficits can also be covered through operating reserve or surplus for the year. Last year and in previous years, when the budget is adopted before December, we bring an amendment to you in January or February that would have these deficits. So because we're not adopting the budget until then, we've had the opportunity to do that now, and we don't need to bring forward an amendment. So again, none of these require any increased requisition. They're all being covered by operating reserve or surplus. And then the last item on the agenda was actually function 250, which we had reduced the amount for the director benefits. And so now I will suggest that you can still pass a motion to adopt the budget as amended, but that amendment will include the director benefits as per the previous motion.
Thank you. So I'd had Director Acton first. Director Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment for Area B Parks function, that $16,500 in 2018 surplus fund revenues from budget function 232, Shawnigan Lake Community Parks, be carried forward into the 2019 budget for expenditure under consultants. So moved.
I'm wondering if it would be best to pull anything we want to change and vote on the rest as a block.
Oh,
because it might
sorry.
just get a bit confusing. Would you be willing to do that, Director
Sure.
Acton?
I would like to
So that is number what?
pull Area B Parks number 2.
number 2. Is there anyone else who would like to pull something? Oh, sorry, Mr.
So,
Carruthers.
Madam Chair, I think if, in consulting with the finance staff, we had suggested that we go through and we approve all of these budgets so that you can get your bottom line, and then if there were potential changes, that we would do that after lunch. That was what we had suggested. It is the call of the committee, but
I forgot that. That's my fault.
Yeah.
I was told that this morning. It makes sense to me to do it that way. So then we have the number, and then in the, after lunch, you can bring forward your. So,
he's comfortable with that?
so you want Ms. Solder to go through each of them or move it as a block? now?
Move them as a block,
Is there a
if you
mover?
were so inclined, yeah.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Acton. To the motion. Anyone want to speak about that? Director Marcotte and Ryan, we have a motion on the floor to move these as a block so that after lunch we can have a report from staff what the bottom line is, and then if there are any concerns, we can deal with those one by one after lunch. So are we ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Oh, do we have any unfinished business? I guess we do, but we're gonna. So, say we come back at 1:15. That gives you time to eat and take a walk. Does that feel good? Sorry? 1 o'clock or 1? Good afternoon, everybody. Do we call it back to order, Mr. Barry? I'd like to call the Corporate Services meeting back to order. And I'll turn it over to Finance, to Ms. Soldair. By the way, while she's preparing, I wanted to thank you all for really what I thought was a very productive and well-flowing morning. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. Based on the decisions made earlier today, our requisition increase in total is now at the magic number of 5.32%. Going to try and make it a little bigger so everyone can see. Make it smaller, make the numbers smaller, but the, looking at Schedule B for how it. So looking at how it relates across the region, and I'm going to try and squish it all in a page. And so that puts it down to, it won't all fit on one page if I make it any bigger, but I will read it to you. The smallest increase as of right now is in electoral area D. The increase per 100,000 of assessed value is 6.79. That includes the new services in that number. And the largest is actually in Ladysmith at 16.04. So one thing to mention is Ladysmith has agreed to become a full participant in the commuter transit service. And so that bylaw, we are still waiting for information back from the ministry. And so that increase for Ladysmith is in large part because of the change to the transit function. And should that, the approval from the ministry not be back prior to, well, we will wait till adopt the budget until we've heard from the ministry one way or the other. And should it change, we will actually need to change the breakdown of the requisition funds accordingly.
Director Stone.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the town of Ladysmith historically has been a lesser participant, if you will, in fully regional functions, and I'm 100% supportive of, you know, being a full regional partnership on transit. I will say I hope the board supports us aggressively pursuing our northbound connections in the future. But that being said, can you move the report over so we can actually see the dollar amounts?
Absolutely. Just going to make it a tiny bit smaller. I mean, it'll fit on the screen. Is that too small?
Yeah. Just a little bit bigger, but just scroll to the right so we can actually see the. So I wanted to make a point for those who may be at home or looking at this. Although the percentage is the highest, the dollar increase per 100,000 of assessed value is the second lowest.
Absolutely.
And that's historical because we haven't been a major participant in the past. And the major increases, and this goes to all of our regional hats, general government, obviously, we just dealt with, but solid waste management complex, transit, and the new functions are really what's impacting all of us. So I just would say, you know, to all of us in the committee, I'm not sure how much more ground we're able to make, but I think that in a tough year and adopting 2 new functions, I just want to echo the chair's comments on being really productive and collaborative around a difficult situation, and I appreciate everybody's input.
Thank you. Director Sebring.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get my head around these numbers. This is my first time I've gone through one of these processes from start to finish. I look at that sheet and I see that in the North Cowichan context, new services amount to 412,000 and the change is 402,000. Could somebody just, in really broad strokes, paint for me what those new services are? Is it primarily those 2 new functions that were approved in the referendum? What are we talking about?
So the change for the new services provided is exactly that. It's just the 2 new services that were provided. It totals 1.25 million down here at the bottom. The change for existing service level is our current requisition increase for all of the current CVRD services, and that change for North Cowichan is 402,000 in total.
So the bottom line is we took 10,000 out.
I don't remember what the number was previously, but if you say so, I will.
If I look at 412 versus 402.
Nope, so 412, so in total, actually, the change for North Cowichan is 822.
Oh, okay.
400 is related to the 2 new services, and 400 is related to current services.
Thank you.
All right, are we okay? More
Yep.
questions?
Director,
Madam Chair, I'm just
No, I
curious how we're going to go about this. Are we going down each one, or is it going to be pulled? Or are you going to call us at a block and we pull what we want, or can we go down each one?
Mr. Carruthers?
So what I was going to suggest, I know there's some outstanding budgets that I think some directors would like to deal with. And so I was going to suggest that potentially the chair go around the table. If there are any directors that have a desire to revisit a budget, that they and they identify those budgets, and that potentially we either deal with them on an electoral area basis or numerical basis, however that goes, or maybe first come, first serve. Once we've gone through those more routine amendments, if the committee is so inclined to be wanting to look at some further, I think that's just going to be at the call of the various directors to basically make their suggestions as the matters come up. But I think it would be beneficial to get rid of some of these more routine matters before you delve into those bigger issues.
Okay. Director Morrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move for function 236 that the capital revenue requisition for budget for function 236 be increased by $12,583. That the capital revenue transfer from operating reserves for budget function 236 be increased by $37,417. And that the capital expenditures land improvements for budget function 236 be increased by $50,000. And I move that, and I have it in writing for Mr. Barry.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded. Would you like to speak to it, Director Morrison? Okay. Can I call the question?
Please do.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone else? Yes.
I was looking for engineering here. I just had if I have a question, I don't have an amendment on this, but I have a question on number 18. It's Lambourne Sewer. Is
Okay.
that appropriate at this time?
Mm-hmm.
So it's parcel tax. Can you explain how parcel tax, this one is on parcel tax specifically. Can you explain how the parcel tax works?
So it's number 804 if you're following along in.
Number 18 of function 804.
Yeah.
So parcel tax works, we charge the exact same amount to every parcel in the jurisdiction. So the parcel tax requisition for function 804 for the year is $32,770. As you can see here on the screen, and this is what we publish on our website as well, we have 146 parcels in the area. So the amount of parcel tax works out to $224 per parcel. It's take the total requisition and divide it by the number of parcels. Every parcel pays the same amount regardless of what property class that parcel's in.
Follow up?
So does it go up? Because is there a requisition that it can go up so many times, so in so many years, or a percentage the same as our other functions?
I believe so. I will look to the corporate officer. I believe that it works the same. There's a service establishment bylaw, and that you can still increase by a total of 25% in a 5-year period without going back to the electors. You can increase anytime you want if you do go back to the electors.
And if if you have a mobile home park or whatever on that property, there's just one parcel tax?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Director Acton.
A motion that $16,500 in 2018 surplus fund revenues from budget function 232 Shawnigan Lake Community Parks be carried forward into the 2019 budget for expenditure under consultants.
Seconder? Do you want to speak to it before I take questions? Director Stone.
So just through to the director, was that to reduce the requisition or to increase the funding for consultants?
Increase it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I call the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. You had another one?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. A motion to raise Area B grant need to $50,000 earmarked for watershed projects at the community level.
Seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone else? So are we saying we're satisfied with
What do you need?
the block then?
A point of order, Madam Chair. Do you need a consent motion for the rest of the block? We've dealt with a few of the points.
Mr. Berry?
Sorry, Madam Chair, they've all been approved. They were done before lunch. So we're just
So we're just-
amending.
Sorry, I
So,
missed that.
so this is our last kick at the can now. So nobody has anything else?
Where is it?
So are we
Oh, yeah,
ready to
I
adjourn?
can do it. No, no.
No?
Sorry, give me a second.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, you
Thank
may.
you so much. That 18,000 in 2018 surplus fund revenues from budget function 325, community planning, be carried forward into the 2019 budget for expenditure under consultants.
Second.
Ready for the question? What, Director Nicholson?
It's community planning.
Is that one that we all have?
A, B, C, E, F, and I.
So maybe I could have some clarification on that, what that's going to be.
Mr. Blackwell? Would you like to go to the podium?
It doesn't work when it gets that far over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the background to this was that there had been a discussion through priority setting at the Electoral Area Services Committee, excuse me, with respect to design charrettes for key areas of the community. At that time, areas like F and B and so forth expressed a desire to do a deeper dive into some of these revitalization demands facing, village areas. Area F chose a slightly different direction, and that brought to the front the next area in the queue, so to speak, and that was Area B, Shawnigan Lake Village. And so that electoral area is looking at undertaking a design charrette in 2019, and so this money would be contributing to that project.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Director Nicholson?
So I don't believe, maybe I'm wrong, but in electoral area services, we've had a discussion about work plans for next year, but we have had extensive discussions about capacity to get the basic stuff done. So I'm just wondering when that conversation's going to happen. Because putting it on the budget kind of implies that we're going to be doing it. And I don't know if we've finished that conversation enough to be able to say that.
Thank you through you,
Blackwell?
Madam Chair, to Director Nicholson. So that work of strategic planning for 2019 is upcoming. This is a bit of a carryover from last year. This won't particularly impact staff resources other than me. This is something that I would be stick handling solely.
I think there's a follow-up coming.
Well, I just think that it's really important we have that conversation because we have significant issues on capacity and, taking you away from managing a lot of, a big, whatever you call the development services. You know, yeah, I am concerned, I'm really concerned that we haven't finished dealing with that issue. That's a big issue to me and to everyone else in electoral area services, I think.
Thank you,
Blackwell?
Madam Chair. So the motion before you is to allocate these funds in this way. Ultimately, once they're there, the board can have, or the committee can have that discussion as to how it wants to allocate staff resources. Without it, the discussion is moot. There won't be the funds to be able to do it. So this at least sets the stage for that discussion, should there be a desire to action this.
Follow up?
So just as long as it doesn't raise expectations that before having that conversation, and that certainly isn't to say that I'm not really supportive of doing those design charrettes, because I think they're really a valuable tool, but I do think we've got some outstanding issues that we really need to address.
Thank you. Director Stone?
Sorry, Mr. Blackwell said it, if you don't put and this is a reserve, right? An operating reserve, so you're just, sorry, a surplus? So you're putting the surplus in this year's budget. If you decide not to, it'll go into next year's surplus.
Director Yolani DiNardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question, but through you to staff. So Area F was next on the list. I think these are very valuable, the village, the charrettes and village planning, especially with a lot of water and sewer being proposed in places. I think it's a valuable thing to do because it'll change your community drastically once the water and sewer come through. So it does deserve a larger discussion with Area F. I haven't heard anything about why Area F has chosen to pass it down to the next area. So I'd be curious in looking at that. I guess that would be in our work plan or when we discuss that. Okay, thank you.
Director Morrison?
Yeah, simply to repeat, this is just putting it in the budget so we can do it if we decide on it, and we can have the work planning discussion at an appropriate venue.
Okay, we're ready for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Is there anything else? I'm hearing a motion to adjourn. Do I have a seconder? All in favor? Oh, are we not ready for that? Oh, we probably should. Is there anyone in the gallery who would like to ask a question? Seeing no one? Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to staff.